He had become a man few could truly understand. Tall and commanding in stature, his presence was enough to silence a boardroom, shift markets, and bend negotiations in his favor. His success had not come from luck. It was forged in an unforgiving crucible of ruthless decisions, sleepless nights, and an unshakable belief that trust was something far too precious to give freely. His home was grand, a fortress of marble and glass perched above the city like a citadel. He lived surrounded by luxury most only dreamed of, yet he felt perpetually uneasy, as if the very wealth that had elevated him also isolated him. His name was Arthur Sterling, and he trusted no one implicitly. Not business partners, not acquaintances, not even his closest associates. Experience had taught him that everyone had a price or a hidden agenda, and that betrayal often arrived unannounced. The only certainty he held was control, absolute unyielding control over his world, his people, his assets, or so he believed. At the center of his household was not him, but someone else. Maria, the household's long-trusted maid. She was not simply an employee. Over the years she had become a quiet constant, always punctual, always diligent, always respectful. She oversaw the care of his children, maintained the rhythm of the household, and handled countless responsibilities with grace and integrity. And yet, despite her impeccable character, Arthur's mind refused to grant her unquestioned trust. To him, loyalty was never proven until it had been tested, and he had devised a test that he believed would expose the truth about Maria's honesty. The safe in his private study was a vault of secret stacks of cash, rare jewelry, financial records, and documents that represented decades of careful accumulation. He kept it locked at all times, its cold metal surface a reminder of the value he placed on what lay within. One evening, after everyone had gone to bed and the house was still, Arthur opened the safe wide, leaving it ajar on purpose, its contents visible and accessible. He told no one. He watched from the shadows as everyone retired, imagining the moment when Maria, faced with the temptation of unguarded wealth, would be tempted or not. He thought of stories he'd heard, of people who took what wasn't theirs when opportunity presented itself. This, he decided, would be the final test. He wanted proof, irrefutable proof, that Maria was either faithful or false. All night he waited, pacing his cavernous study, glancing at the open safe with unsettling anticipation. What he expected was a betrayal, but as the night deepened, nothing that happened. The house remained silent. The safe remained undisturbed. The hours ticked on, and at some point in the small hours of dawn, Arthur dozed off in his chair. He woke to sunlight filtering through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. He stretched, his mind still foggy from lack, off sleep and heavy with anticipation of what he might discover. He didn't need to go to the safe to know what awaited. He could feel it in the quiet weight of the house. He walked toward the study, his footsteps echoing off the walls. When he entered, the safe was still open exactly as he had left it, but something was different. Beneath the safe, on the floor, was a neat stack of envelopes, each with Maria's careful handwriting on top. His heart skipped. He didn't want to believe what he feared they might contain, yet he felt compelled to read them. The envelopes were organized with precision. One was labeled receipts, another notes, another items taken for repairs, and another inventory record. Each envelope contained meticulous records that chronicled every piece of jewelry, every document, every amount of cash that had been removed from or returned to the safe over the past month. Marino had recorded every instance where she accessed the safe, always accompanied by a signed note from Arthur or one of his children who had permission. He pulled out the last envelope, and his breath caught. It was labeled simply, "Personal notes to be read by Mr. Sterling only." Inside was a single letter. "Mr. Sterling," it began, with dignity and calm. "I have worked in your household for many years. I have done my duties with respect and commitment, always striving to uphold the trust you placed in me. I know that honesty can sometimes be hard to believe in others when one has known deceit. If this letter finds you, it also finds a record of every time I have opened your safe, and why. I have never taken a thing that was not given to me or permitted by you. I ask not for praise, only for fairness in your judgment. Not because you owe me, but because you once told me that truth should be self-evident." Arthur stood still, the letter trembling slightly in his hand. For a moment the silence around him felt heavier than ever. He imagined all the times he had eyed Maria with suspicion, all the decisions he made believing loyalty was something to be feared until proven. He had watched her with a cold eye even when she handled his children with compassion and attended to their needs as though they were her own. And yet, here was proof, not of a temptation seized, but of trust upheld. His eyes lifted toward the safe, then drifted toward the hallway, where distant sounds of early morning told him the rest of the house was waking. He felt a strange tug in his chest, like a part of him that had long been locked away was stirring. The nameplates on his desks, the accolades on his walls, the deals he had brokered, all seemed suddenly inconsequential in the face of this quiet act of integrity. He folded the letter slowly, his thoughts heavy with realization. He had sought to trap her, to test her character, yet she had responded not with anger or defensiveness, but with clarity, dignity, and candor. Her honesty was not just in the records she kept, but in the respect she paid to his values even when he doubted. Hurry left the study, the letter still in his hand, and walked toward the heart of his home. As he descended the marble stairs, he saw his children gathered at the breakfast table, laughing and talking with Maria as she served them warm food and gentle smiles. They greeted him cheerfully, unaware of what he had discovered moments before. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," Maria said, if only out of habit. Her voice was worn but steady, the same voice he had heard countless mornings as she helped his children prepare for school. "Morning," he replied, his voice softer than he expected. He looked into her eyes, and for the first time, he saw not merely an employee, but a person whose character had quietly stood firm in the face of doubt. Later that day, as the sunlight moved through his office, he placed Maria's letter on his desk and sat down, his mind unusually still. He realized how much his suspicion had cost him, not in money or opportunity, but in the way he perceived others. His life had been shaped by fear disguised as caution, and he saw now that trust was not a weakness but a choice, one that could free people rather than confine them. Behind walls of doubt, he called Maria into his study that afternoon. She entered with poise and respect, but something in his expression caused her to pause, a softness, a hesitation she had never seen before. "Maria," he began, and for once his voice lacked the calculated precision he usually wielded. "I read your letter, I saw the records you left. I want to apologize not for testing you, but for doubting your integrity." She looked at him with quiet composure, her eyes steady yet reflective. "Sir," she said, "I understand that trust is not always easy. I only wanted to honor what you gave me every day, the dignity of this work, and the care of your family." He felt something shift inside him, a deep release he had never known. "I want to thank you," he said simply, "not just for your honesty, but for reminding me what integrity looks like even when no one is watching." She nodded, a gentle smile forming on her lips. In that moment, Arthur Sterling understood not just the value of unwavering honesty, but the profound impact it had on the human heart. From that day forward, his world looked different. He didn't dismantle his safeguards or abandon his cautious nature, but he learned to acknowledge goodness when it stood before him, unafraid of scrutiny, untainted by suspicion. Maria continued her work in his home, but now with a new depth of respect from the man who once watched her from the shadows. And every time he saw her interact with his children with sincere care and obvious affection, he felt his own walls soften a little more. He never forgot the lesson of the open safe. He saw it not as a test of someone else, but as a mirror, held up to his own fears, a reminder that suspicion can isolate a person, whereas trust, once earned, can create unity. And in the quiet moments, as he stood in his study gazing at his safe now securely locked, he thought of Maria's letter and how a simple act of honesty had changed him more than any deal, any contract, any triumph he had ever known. He felt gratitude for her, for his children, and for the truth that had set him free from the prison of his own making. Please like, share, and subscribe Loverasky. We share stories the world need to feel again.